Gus is one of the most unique brawlers in the game due to his blend of several playstyles. In this slideshow, I'll take a look at what makes Gus so special and is unique and heavy-tuned with relationship to aggressive brawlers. Now, let's continue the most worrying trend in this channel, asking for your support. As always, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Only 15% of you are subscribed, so try and get that number up. I know you won't. So watch the full video if you're interested in the topic and enjoy the video. Also, you may have noticed something different about this video. Me personally, I can't put my finger on it, but I think the AI voice got a new update that was pretty low quality. Yes, my mic quality is bad. Yes, I sound dumb. I would say deal with it, but you'd probably click off the video, so deal with it. With those things out of the way, let's get to talking about the most diabolical child in Brawl Stars, especially the Buster. At first glance, Gus doesn't really look too unique, with the main attack that is very similar to that of B's. It has a larger attack width than most marksmen like Piper or Angelo, but not too large where it becomes easy to hit shots, and even regularly auto-aim. He has a very long range of 9.33 tiles that makes him once again compared to marksmen, which is a theme with his playstyle as well, but more on that later. Each of his attacks deals a pretty solid 2240 damage, which is similar to that of Bell. His reload speed isn't anything special to speak about either, but Gus charges his super every 4 shots, which is pretty quick, so there must be a reason for it, which I will also touch on later this video. All of this talk about Gus's main attack, and I haven't even mentioned one of the most unique mechanics that is tied with it, his ability to create spirits. What are spirits? Basically, Gus has a bar in which every attack that Gus hits fills 1/3 of the bar. Once the bar is filled, the next attack Gus hits will spawn a spirit and reset his bar. The spirit will spawn right where the enemy was hit, and picking it up will deal 1600 damage. Now, let's go on to Gus's super. Gus's super sees him shoot a shield to either himself or his teammates. The super is able to pass through walls and has a relatively larger width than the regular attack. If Gus aims the super, then he shoots it towards his allies. If Gus auto-aims the super, then he shoots it towards himself. As for the super itself, it gives a shield of 5200 health, regardless of Gus or the teammate's health. The super's health decays by 5% every 0.5 seconds, meaning in a perfect world with no outside damage loss, the super will decay after 10 seconds. But that isn't it. In a somewhat recent balance change, Gus's super gained the ability to knock back nearby enemies. Let's start analyzing Gus now. With what I said earlier about Gus's main attack, one thing becomes clear. Gus is quite similar to a marksman. His range is very long, which is basically the very first requirement of being a marksman. Furthermore, his singular attack projectile and the nature of his main attack make him even more similar to that of other marksmen. His gameplay also reflects this, with Gus often being played at long ranges, used to continually snipe enemies, but does have an ability to attack up close if needed, though not without some drawbacks. He's actually a bit similar to Bell. Their main differences are of course the large gaps in range and attack width. Actually, those are very important differences, but stay with me now. Their attack damages are very similar, with a solid 2000 damage per shot. Not low enough to be considered chip damage, but not high enough as to where it needs a drawback, like Piper. Both Gus and Bell are quite similar in their close and mid-range interactions. Both are unlike Piper and Brock, who are mostly unusable in the mid and short range because they can still reliably hit the shot for the same amount of damage. Whereas Gus has it easier in hitting shots, Bell can reload her shots faster, especially with the reload gear, bringing them to be more equal in those interactions. They also have similar supercharge rates, but the super is where their similarities end and they become their own brawlers. But what was the whole point of this comparison? To show that in many ways, Gus is very similar to a marksman. I don't want to lay it on too thick with the comparisons, but he's similar to another support in Byron, in which the nature of their main attack and their general playstyle is similar to a marksman playstyle, but the super is what is used to set them apart, though both also have subtle differences, with Gus being able to spawn spirits and Byron able to heal his teammates with his main attack. So how is Gus a support, and what types of support is he? Well, if you ask the first question, no offense, but you might be a little slow. The second one, however, I can answer. But to answer it, we need to take a deeper look into Gus's super and its uses. I mentioned all the statistics of Gus's super, but when is it actually used? As mentioned before, there are 2 different ways of using it, auto-aiming it on yourself, or aiming it to specifically use on another teammate. So when would each scenario be appropriate? As for using it on yourself, the best and most obvious answer would be when your teammates are dead. However, using it on yourself is also good sometimes when you're at low health, but not all the time. You see, using the super on yourself isn't the most value. as unless it is vital that you stay alive, the super will be much better used on a brawler that is more aggressive and will actually make better use of the super. Gus rarely gets up close with other brawlers, and unless you are at low health, there's basically no point in using your super on yourself compared to using it on your teammates. So who do you use it on then? Gus's super synergizes incredibly well with aggressive brawlers especially. One of the biggest weaknesses on most aggressive brawlers is that they are forced to soak up a lot of damage in order to be able to deal a larger amount of damage. This leads to a kill or be killed scenario, in many cases, if the aggressive brawler decides to take the risk to get up close to try and get the kill. But what happens if suddenly the aggressive brawler gets an extra 5,000 health to use in their supposed deathmatch? Well, more likely than not, the aggro brawler will win the matchup, and this is why Gus's super is so useful for aggressive brawlers. It not only provides value by actually having the teammates use up the shield health, but it also allows for the aggressive brawler to have a much easier chance at winning their deathmatch matchups. This is why Gus is best used with aggressive brawlers and not brawlers of other classes such as marksmen or controllers. Why? Because for aggressive brawlers, they often have to give damage in their quest to kill the enemy, giving value to the shield. But for long range brawlers, their best strategy is to stay outside of enemy reach, and so more often than not, giving the Gus shield to them will not have much of an impact, because they aren't as reliant on the extra health as the other aggressive brawlers are. There's also a niche use for Gus's super on low health brawlers that are about to die to make sure they either escape to safety or it can eliminate the enemy, but this is very situational. Now that we know what Gus's super is best used for and some of its other uses, let's take a look at what type of support this classifies Gus as. With what I said earlier, it becomes clear that instead of directly healing his teammates like Byron, Barry, or Pam, Gus gives a shield that helps accentuate his teammates' strength, and especially his aggressive teammates' strength in tough situations. This classifies him neatly into something called a second wind support. What is a second wind? A second wind is an extra burst of energy or strength when you are weak that makes it possible for you to continue. This perfectly describes what Gus's super does to his teammates. It is usually used when your teammates aren't at full health and need extra help, and strength if you're considering the star power. But we'll touch on that later and makes it so that your teammates can have a much better chance at finishing the enemy off, perfectly encapsulating the definition of a second wind. And so we have now defined what Gus's roles are. Or have we? To cover the full extent of Gus and his role, we must first take a look at his unlockables. Gus's first gadget is called Cookie Popper. Cookie Popper makes it so that every single spirit on the map explodes, with each spirit dealing the same amount of damage as Gus's main attack, which is 2240 damage. Furthermore, the amount of damage dealt can actually stack, so two spirits at the same time, at the same location, can deal 4480 damage, which is probably not going to be actually happen in 99% of scenarios. Gus's second gadget is Soul Switcher, which makes him instantly lose 5% of his health, but will instantly charge his bar to get a spirit. Now let's go over Gus's star powers. Health Bonanza makes it so that the healing of each spirit is doubled. Gus's other star power is Spirit Animal. This makes it so that Gus's super will now make it so that his teammates will also deal 25% more damage for 5 seconds after gaining the shield. Now that we finished giving the description of each unlockable, let's talk about them in order of importance. There isn't too much to say about Health Bonanza, as it is merely a stat increase to Gus's spirits. It is likely there to provide a larger incentive to pick up Gus's spirits, even if they are in more dangerous locations due to extra healing that it gives. Soul Switcher is another attempt by Supercell to make a trade-off gadget like they did with both of Ash's gadgets, but it doesn't particularly work in this case. The spirits themselves aren't the most useful, as they are often in dangerous places, because the only places they spawn are on the top of the enemies. The very nature of this makes it so more useful to use the spirits for damage instead of healing, but we'll talk about that more later. For now, both the Soul Switcher gadget and the Health Bonanza star powers are attempts at making spirits more valuable to pick up / more abundant, but neither of them particularly succeeds at their goal. Now, let's talk about Gus's second star power, Spirit Animal. This star power is also one of the main reasons for the second wind classification of Gus. It makes his teammates more powerful. While his super gives his teammates more survivability, this star power furthers it by giving his teammates a damage boost. This basically seals the deal in the deathmatch matchup that I mentioned before for aggressive brawlers. And at this point, if your teammate loses the matchup with the shield and the power boost, then it is definitely a skill issue. And now let's talk about Cookie Popper. Cookie Popper makes it so that Gus's spirits are no longer mere healing devices that you would likely not use in most situations, and turns them into a dangerous tool against enemies. A singular spirit can be used as an assassination tool and a method of control at the same time, assassinating brawlers that are at low health and their its radius, while also preventing people from getting too close to the spirit, as they're at risk of getting damaged by the gadget. But once there becomes multiple spirits on the map, Gus really starts to turn into a bit of a controller. This basically becomes a larger version of what I mentioned with the Spingle Spirit. Gus is now able to subtly control several areas with the threat of being damaged and being knocked back before the gadget's nerf. Speaking of knockback, let's talk about Gus's relationship with aggressive brawlers. Just as with his main attack and his health, Gus isn't very good at short range. He isn't as bad as marksmen like Piper or Angelo, but he's a far cry from being good at short range, and is mostly weak against aggressive brawlers. His super helped to keep him alive, but as I've mentioned before, using a super on yourself is often a waste of it unless it's needed. So how does Gus deal with aggressive brawlers? Cookie Popper is the answer. The original version of the gadget allowed him to knock back enemies as well, which let him get away from them to safety. With all of these uses, it is no wonder why many people viewed Cookie Popper as an essential part of Gus's kit. But an unlockable being a necessary part of a kit is never a good sign, and Supercell decided to take steps to stop this from happening. They did this in the form of taking away the knockback from Cookie Popper. This did have an impact on how good Cookie Popper was, and did reduce the reliance that Gus had on it, but it was still by far the better gadget, and still is. But it now meant that Gus could no longer deal as well with aggressive brawlers. His only means of getting away from aggro brawlers was gone, and now he had no reliable tools to deal with them. As the saying goes, however, trust the process. Supercell gave another balance change to Gus, this time giving Gus a knockback whenever he uses super, similar to the knockback of Cookie Popper. If used on Gus himself, it knocks back enemies close to him, but if used on a teammate, it knocks back enemies that are near the teammate, and not next to Gus. This makes the super more useful for non-aggressive brawlers who are weak to the aggro brawlers, as they also get the useful knockback. So overall, this was actually a very great balance change for Gus. Not only did it bring back Gus's ability to deal with aggressive brawlers, but it also accentuated Gus's current abilities as a second wind brawler. It allowed his teammates to have more breathing room, and the super to have a more generalizable use to not only aggressive brawlers, but also long-range brawlers that are in tough situations. And that's the PowerPoint. Overall, Gus is one of the most interesting brawlers in the game, and uses a blend of multiple styles of play in his gameplay. His abilities as a second wind support, especially for aggro brawlers, are very unique, and apart from the charades of his Cookie Popper gadget, Gus has been balanced quite well, and one of the few brawlers in the game that we can say are truly balanced. Sorry for all the mistakes in this video, it's my first time, so I hope you guys take it easy on me, but anyways, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.